Hello everyone, I am the Rainfall Records and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. The old access road was less a path and more a suggestion. A faint scar winding its way through the dense rain-soaked pines. My tires, already struggling with the slick mud, protested with a low, mournful hum. Hours ago, the storm had been a distant rumble, a promise whispered on the radio. Now it was a living, breathing entity, pressing down on the isolated coast, shrouding everything in a thick gray veil of water. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The old lighthouse, my destination, stood silhouetted against the bruised sky, a solitary sentinel on the craggy headland. For the next 3 months, this was to be my escape. My sanctuary, a place where the relentless demands of the city, the ever-present static of my own restless mind, could finally be drowned out by the roar of the ocean and the rain. Oh, the rain was already proving to be a formidable companion. It lashed against the windshield, a ceaseless drumming, washing away the last vestiges of the familiar world. The car shuddered, hitting a deep rut, and stalled. A sigh escaped me, more a surrender than a frustration. The silence that followed. The engine's demise was thick, punctuated only by the insistent shush of the rain, the whisper of unseen waves crashing against the rocks far below. No cell service, of course, that was part of the appeal, wasn't it? Total disconnection. With a shrug, I grabbed my duffel bag and umbrella. The moment I stepped out, the wind tore at the umbrella, ripping it from my grasp, sending it tumbling into the shadowy embrace of the woods, perfect, a fitting welcome. I pulled my hood tighter, burying my face against the onslaught, and started walking. The lighthouse loomed larger now, its whitewashed stone greenier than in the photos, streaked with years of sea salt and grime. The glass lantern room at the top, usually a symbol of guidance, seemed to stare down with empty, dead eyes. A sense of unease, subtle but persistent, began to coil in my stomach. It wasn't the isolation, not yet. It was something else, a feeling that the structure itself held a breath it refused to release. The heavy iron door groaned open with a sound like a tortured sigh. Inside, the air was cold, damp, and smelled of salt, mildew, and something else. Something metallic, like old pennies, or dried blood. I dismissed it as my imagination, the anxieties of a long, stressful journey. The silence inside was profound, a sharp contrast to the furious drumming of the rain on the lantern room above, and the distant, thunderous crash of the waves. I found the generator in a small shed beside the lighthouse, a rusted relic that sputtered to life after several stubborn attempts. The single bare bulb in the main watchroom flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. Dust motes, disturbed by my entrance, spun in the faint light a chaotic galaxy. The furniture was sparse, a worn wooden table, a few rickety chairs, and a narrow cot in a small alcove. Primitive, but functional. My first task was to secure the windows. They rattled fiercely in their frames, protesting the storm's fury. As I moved from one to the next, securing the rusted latches, I noticed things. A deep scratch on the wall beside one window, too low to be accidental. A single dark, dried stain on the wooden floorboards, almost camouflaged by age and dirt. My mind, still fighting for normalcy, rationalized. Old house, old residence, forgotten accidents. The rain outside intensified, a crescendo of water slamming against the stone, rattling the very foundations of the lighthouse. It was a suffocating sound, a wall of white noise that seemed to absorb all other sounds, leaving only itself. I pulled a thin blanket over the cot, listening to the relentless drumming of the rain, the mournful howl of the wind funneling down the central shaft of the lighthouse. Sleep, I knew, would not come easy tonight. Every creak of the old structure, every moan of the wind, seemed amplified by the storm, distorting into something else. Something deliberate. Just as I was drifting into a restless doze, a distinct sound cut through the monotonous drone of the rain. A scraping, a soft, rhythmic scrape. 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 It seemed to come from directly above me, from the spiral staircase, leading up to the lantern room. My eyes snapped open. I held my breath, listening. The scraping continued, slow and deliberate, as if something heavy was being dragged up the stone steps. My heart began to pound. It couldn't be the wind. This was too distinct, too rhythmic. I tried to rationalize. Old pipes, a loose shutter, a rat. But the sound persisted, growing fainter as it ascended until it stopped directly over my head. Silence, save for the storm's unyielding assault. My imagination, I told myself. Exhaustion, nothing more. But I kept my eyes fixed on the dark, winding stairs, waiting and listening. I barely slept. Every shadow seemed to coalesce into a form. Every whisper of the wind transformed into a name called. The scraping sound hadn't returned, but the chilling memory of it lingered. With the first hints of gray dawn struggling against the unbroken clouds and relentless rain, I rose, stiff and unsettled. The metallic smell from yesterday seemed stronger in the morning air. I decided to explore. The lighthouse had 6 levels, connected by the narrow, winding spiral staircase. Each level was a small circular room, mostly empty, save for remnants of a forgotten life. On the second level, an old, overturned wooden chair lay by the wall. It looked as if it had been thrown or toppled violently. I righted it, my fingers brushing against the cold, damp wood. On the third level, I found a small, dusty collection of books scattered on the floor. Most were navigational charts and logbooks, their pages brittle with age. One, however, was different. A personal diary, bound in decaying leather. The script inside was faded, erratic, almost feverish. The entries spoke of loneliness, of storms, and of something else. The light. It calls to something beyond the fog, beyond the rain. I hear it. I hear them, moving in the dark. The entries became less coherent, scrawled with desperate urgency, before abruptly stopping. My blood ran cold. The rain beat against the outer walls with an oppressive fury. It was a constant drumming reminder of my isolation, the impossibility of escape. I ascended further, the air growing colder, thinner, filled with the amplified sound of the rain lashing against the lantern room. The fourth level was empty, save for a single tarnished brass compass spinning slowly on the floor, its needle pointing south, then north, then spinning wildly, as if confused by an unseen magnetic force. I picked it up, my fingers tingling. With a strange chill, the fifth level was the most unsettling. It had been used as a sleeping quarter, perhaps. A thin, moldering mattress lay on the floor. Beside it, a small wooden nightstand. On the nightstand, a single rusty razor, and embedded in the floorboards beside the bed a deep, gouged mark, long and irregular as if something heavy had been dragged over it again and again. The same mark I'd seen by the window on the ground floor. My mind raced. This was no ordinary wear and tear. I tried to shake off the growing dread. The previous keeper, I reasoned, was perhaps eccentric, maybe even unstable, trapped by the elements, by the isolation. It made sense. But the creeping certainty that I was not alone here began to solidify. It wasn't a human presence I felt, not one that breathed and walked. It was something else, something that moved with the silence, that existed within the chill. The rain outside intensified, a roaring wall of water and wind that seemed to press in on the lighthouse, trying to breach its ancient stone. I pressed my palm against the cold, damp wall of the 6th level just below the lantern room. It vibrated with the force of the storm, but also something else. A faint tremor, like a heartbeat, or a low hum deep within the stone. Then a new sound. Above the furious drumming of the rain, above the mournful howl of the wind, I heard it. A whisper. Just a single drawn-out syllable, carried on the drafts that snaked through the lighthouse. It seemed to coil down the central shaft, rising from the lower levels, then disappearing. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I stood perfectly still, listening, every nerve ending screaming. Silence. Only the unyielding rhythm of the rain remained. I told myself it was the wind, playing tricks, the old structure, my mind. But the sense of being watched, of being toyed with, was becoming overwhelming. I felt eyes on me, even in the absolute darkness of the levels below, even in the blinding rain outside. I was a trespasser, and something here didn't like it. A cold dread seeped into my bones. I remembered the words from the diary. I hear them, moving in the dark. Was I hearing them too, or was it just the rain? The boundary between the two felt terrifyingly thin. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from downstairs, from the main watchroom. It sounded like something heavy had fallen. My heart leaped into my throat. I stood absolutely still, my gaze fixed on the spiral staircase leading down. The rain outside seemed to hold its breath for a moment, then resumed its relentless beat. I knew I couldn't ignore it. With trembling hands, I gripped the cold, damp railing and slowly, cautiously began my descent. Each step creaked, amplified by the heavy silence, each creak a betrayal. The further down I went, the stronger the metallic, coppery smell became, clinging to the damp air. My footsteps, slow and deliberate, seemed deafening in the profound quiet that had settled over the lighthouse, broken only by the unrelenting roar of the rain outside. When I reached the main watchroom, my breath hitched. The old wooden table, previously against the far wall, was now overturned. One of the rickety chairs lay smashed beside it, splintered wood scattered across the floor. But that wasn't what stole my breath. On the floor in the center of the room was a fresh, dark, wet stain. It looked like blood, but it was too dark, too large, and it smelled distinctly of that metallic, coppery scent. My mind reeled, grasping for a rational explanation. Animal? A rat? No, this was too much. Panic began to claw its way up my throat. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the room, searching for something, anything, to explain what I was seeing. The windows, still rattling fiercely in the storm's fury, seemed to offer no escape. I was trapped. Trapped with whatever this was. Then, from the dark alcove where my cot lay, came a new sound. A low, guttural moan. Not human. Something ancient, deep and filled with sorrow. It seemed to resonate with the very stone of the lighthouse, vibrating in my teeth. The rain outside seemed to amplify its sound, making it feel closer, more pervasive. I stood frozen, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had to see, had to know. With a shaky hand, I reached for the old oil lamp on the wall, struggling to light it. The flickering flame cast grotesque shadows, dancing mockingly, on the walls. As the light expanded, I peered into the alcove. The cot was empty. The blanket I had pulled over it was now crumpled on the floor, half hidden by the overturned table. Nothing else. Just the oppressive silence, the deepening cold, and the unrelenting drumming of the rain. Then, I saw it. On the wall inside the alcove, just above where the cot had been, etched into the rough stone with something sharp, were a series of symbols. Not letters, but strange, angular marks, swirling into each other, radiating outwards. And beneath them, scrawled furiously, almost violently, were the words, "You are seen." My blood ran cold. The air grew heavy, suffocating. The rain outside seemed to laugh, its continuous torrent mimicking a deranged chuckle. It was no longer a comforting sound, but a monstrous, mocking presence. I spun around, convinced something was directly behind me. Nothing. Only the empty room, the shattered chair, the dark stain, and the relentless pounding rain against the windows. I felt a sudden, intense chill, like a wave of Arctic air washing over me, raising goosebumps on my arms. And with it, a whisper, right beside my ear. Not the wind, not the rain. A voice, hoarse and ragged, that breathed a single word. Home. I stumbled backwards, tripping over the broken chair, falling hard to the floor. My head hit the cold stone with a dull thud. Darkness threatened to consume me, but I fought it desperately. My eyes darted around the room, through the dancing, shadows cast by the struggling lamp. Nothing there, yet the presence was overwhelming. It was in the air, in the cold, in the very stone of the lighthouse. And the rain. The rain was its voice. I crawled backwards, scrambling towards the iron door, my only way out. But as my fingers fumbled for the cold metal handle, a low, drawn-out scrape echoed from above. Then another, and another. The distinct rhythmic sound from last night. It was descending the spiral staircase. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. My breath hitched. I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaking uncontrollably. The scraping grew louder, moving from the 5th level to the 4th, to the 3rd. Each scrape was a terrifying step closer. The metallic smell was overpowering now, filling my lungs, tasting like iron. The scraping stopped on the 2nd level. Silence. Only the furious deluge of the rain against the lantern room. Then a soft thud, a pause, and then, from directly behind the thin wooden door that separated the watchroom from the spiral staircase, a faint scratching began. Light, rhythmic, like fingernails against wood, and then a new sound, chillingly familiar. The distinct sound of something being dragged across the stone floor of the landing just outside the door. I backed away, pressing myself against the far wall, my eyes fixed on the door. The scratching intensified, becoming more frantic, desperate. And then, through the thin crack beneath the door, a trickle of dark, viscous liquid began to seep, spreading slowly across the dusty floorboards. It was the same dark, coppery stain I had seen in the center of the room, and it pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly in the dim light. The scratching stopped. The rain outside seemed to fall in slow motion now, each drop an echo of my own frantic heartbeat. And then, a slow, agonizing groan from behind the door, as if something immense was pressing against it, trying to force its way through. The wood groaned, splitting, a thin crack appearing right where the scratching had been. I closed my eyes, tears mixing with the sweat on my face. The cold had intensified, an unnatural chill that seemed to emanate from the very walls. I opened my eyes, and through the newly formed crack in the door I saw it. Not a face, not a limb, just a darkness, a profound shifting void that seemed to absorb the already dim light of the lighthouse. And from within that darkness, I felt a terrible, ancient hunger. The groan from behind the door deepened, growing into a guttural, earth-shaking rumble. The lighthouse itself seemed to vibrate, the stones trembling. The rain outside, which had been a constant companion, now seemed to merge with the sound, becoming one terrifying, deafening roar. The old iron door began to buckle inward, slowly, agonizingly. The words from the diary screamed in my mind. The light. It calls to something beyond the fog, beyond the rain. I hear it. I hear them, moving in the dark. My breath hitched. The air was thick with the metallic smell, with the cold, with the palpable presence of the unseen. The light from the lamp flickered, struggled, then died, plunging the watchroom into absolute darkness. Only the faintest, ghostly light from the lantern room above pierced the gloom, illuminating the crack in the door, the trickle of darkness beneath it, and the now deafening, drowning sound of the relentless rain, which seemed to be the only thing left in this terrifying place. Could still hear it even without the light. The groan, the scraping, the relentless push against the door. And the rain. The rain was everywhere. It was in the walls. It was in the floor. It was in the very air I breathed. It was in the darkness. It was the voice of the lighthouse itself, and I knew with a chilling certainty that the rain would never stop. Not here, not in Ethelwood, not in this beacon of dread.